So, okay, so step one of I just found out that I'm denied, right? So I get the letter and they say kick rocks. So step one, you already said, read the letter, right? That's the number one thing. And it could be, a whole host of reasons, but you need to read it to understand how you need to re-engage. You need to be cognizant of time frames. Your big thing here is preserving your effective date. I mean, that's always my number one kind of focus is, okay, look, that's fine. I could take a knee and adjust fire, but I want to make sure that I preserve my effective date. So I know that I have some suspense dates that I'm going to set for myself as I try to correct this. Now, ideally, you're filing claims for which you should be filing for, right? You're not just blindly just throwing out things just to throw things out. Now, I'm going to throw out a reason why something could be denied that maybe you're not thinking of even, Clay. What I tell people to do is, let's kind of fast walk through this. So you filed your intent to file. Then you're coming up on the end of it. You're 10, 11 months in, and now you're like, oh man, feet to the fire. I need to file my claim because I'm going to lose my intent to file. You had 7 things you wanted to file for, but you only have documentation for 4. So you're not going to just file for those 4 that you have the evidence for. You're going to file for all 7, regardless if you have evidence. File with nothing. File with no diagnosis. I don't care. File with nothing. Just write down what you're going to file for. The VA is going to deny you, and that's okay because guess what? Now you have another year to file your supplemental, still preserving that initial intent to file date. Super important. So read through your denial. It's going to give you favorable findings. It's going to tell you what you did right, which is good, right? So maybe they give you some sort of favorable findings that you can work from. But then you're going to figure out, like Clay said, maybe you missed a diagnosis, right? Your favorable finding is that you're an honorably discharged veteran of whatever era, right? Great. So you may have thought that the VA was going to help you with your diagnosis, right? Look, I know I have migraines. I don't need to go to a doctor and pay $300 for a first visit, right? To figure out that I have migraines. I already know because I eat, 1,600 milligrams of Motrin, 3 aspirin, and 2 Tylenol every day. I already know, right? Unfortunately, the VA doesn't really help you in that aspect of establishing your diagnosis. You need to prove that you have that issue. So step one, back to what your question was really make sure that you understand what was missing, and make sure that you understand your suspense dates to preserve that initial filing date. I could keep rambling and go on the next things that I would do, but I want to kick it back to you to get your thoughts on it, and then I'll come back in and add to that.
Yeah, I like how you added, I had 4 out of 7 conditions with evidence, but I submitted for 7 anyways. I wholeheartedly agree, right? And as you submit, you don't have to wait for the denial to continue to gather that evidence. I would just start preparing my supplemental claim right then and there, right? And so I'm completely on board with that, right? Now, is that, that's a kind of a gray area of, are you seeing what sticks to the wall? Yeah, sure. But that, hey, I'm going to get evidence for these. I just want to preserve my date. So it's a little bit of I totally agree with that one. I want to double down on, you said what's missing and what that really means. And we had been talking about it this whole episode, right? What's missing is the big 3. 3 things are needed for service connection, period. It's the in-service event, time and service, current diagnosis, and the nexus. And we've already stated this, right? On your decision letter in favorable findings, it will tell you which of the 3 you have. Obviously, if you're denied, you don't have the nexus, right? That's obvious. And so it's going to say favorable findings. You do have complaints in your service treatment records of whatever, of symptoms of the claimed condition. Or it's going to say you have been diagnosed with a disability. You've been diagnosed for lumbosacral strain. Boom. In service event, current diagnosis. The nexus, you're not going to see a favorable nexus in a denial. Okay. And then a side note, and I like how you had mentioned it because it's funny. For TERA claims, which is toxic exposure risk activity / the PACT Act, in favorable findings, it will say, hey, you're a honorable veteran that served in the Gulf War era. You're like, thanks. I didn't know that, right? I didn't know that I was an Afghan, but I appreciate you telling me. I always find that funny. And then for secondary conditions in favorable findings, which is hilarious to me, they'll also say, hey, your primary condition that you claimed is service connected. It's like, I knew that. Thank you. Right. And so those two, I'm not gonna say they don't matter, but it's kind of like, a process thing more than actual information. And so on the decision letter, there's two things you need to look at: favorable findings for the in-service events and the current diagnosis, right? Whatever is missing, you go get. And then the second thing you look at above favorable findings, you will have a snippet of the VA, or not the VA, the C&P examiner contracted by the VA, their opinion. And it'll always say, the examiner opined, whatever. Basically a negative nexus, okay? And it will tell you the reason. And so, for instance, let's get back to tinnitus and migraines, because I just love saying this, because it's just, people always preach migraines secondary to tinnitus, which I'm a fan of. But we have to understand the evidence too. If you're denied migraine secondary to tinnitus, I could almost bet my life it's going to say examiner opined, although tinnitus and migraines have some sort of linkage, blah, 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 blah. There's no hard medical literature that tinnitus causes migraines. It's going to say paraphrase version of that. And so knowing that, okay, so now you know that you have been diagnosed. So you have been diagnosed with migraines. It'll be in favorable findings, but you're missing the nexus because we read the decision letter. So now that I know that, it gets back to what we talked about, private nexus, right? Do I consider a private nexus at that point? The answer is maybe, right? How good is your evidence? And we have to look at competing evidence too. I love talking about competing evidence because it's just as important as evidence, right? So migraine secondary to tinnitus, the C&P examiner opined they're not connected because of medical literature, blah, 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 which is correct, right? It's totally appropriate for the examiner to do. But there's also competing evidence to that opinion, and that's what your private nexus could come in clutch for that specifically. Now, who would you go for? Who would I go to for migraine secondary to tinnitus? Would it be a neurologist or an audiologist? My opinion is the audiologist because it's secondary to tinnitus specifically. If you're going migraine secondary to PTSD or, a TBI, then we're talking about psychiatrist or neurologist, right? So the primary condition matters just as much as the secondary condition. And food for thought, I would never consider a nurse practitioner or anyone that is I shouldn't say nurse practitioner. Let's say like a general medical field, right? I would never go to Gen Med for an opinion if I'm paying for a private nexus. If I'm paying for it, I'm going top dog, right? Psychiatrist over psychologist, physician over PA or NP, right? Neurologist over whatever is below a neurologist. I'm not sure. That's just my 2 cents on denials. Read your decision letters. Maybe consider a private nexus, right? It's not a slam dunk though. But all right, Jason, that's my 2 cents on denials. There's so much more on denials, and I'm definitely looking forward to hearing what you're about to say.
Well, the first thing I'm going to say is it's raining, and so I have some nice white noise in the background, so I apologize for that. So, so denials, right? What we're talking about here is how to correct that denial, right? So the whole purpose of this is not, oh, this is why you got denied, but that's an important aspect because we need to turn it around and basically file that supplemental claim to get them to overturn the denial. Now, it's important like what you said, Clay, there's many things, I could sit here and just double down on everything you said. It makes a lot of sense, and it's very important for people to understand the reasons why. Now, once you understand the reason why you were denied, you need to really, and it all comes back to evidence, and that's what you're going to keep hearing, is the evidence aspect. The one thing I want to double down on here with what you said, Clay, is that, and I'm going to frame it a little bit differently. As a veteran who's getting ready to file a claim because it eventually gets denied, if you understand up front, right? So we do a lot of, okay, look, here's the result. Let's swim upstream, see if we could correct it upstream so you don't have to deal with it. So I'm going to give two different versions, right? One is that if you could swim upstream and fix it before it happens, awesome. And then what happens when you're denied? How do you fix it then and move forward? So number one, the VA doesn't give a hoot which way you do it. They're just processing claims, right? I believe. Contrary to people thinking, oh, this veteran filed the claim again. I'm going to deny him just because, right? No, they're texting their friends. They're talking about what they're going to do on the weekend. They're wanting to get out of there at 5 o'clock. They could care less. They don't remember your name. So, in my opinion, could be wrong. Who knows? Maybe you pissed somebody off. I don't know. So, here you are in this situation. If you could do it over again, understanding from an evidence perspective, again, what you said, Clay, evidence is for you or against you. The VA's threshold is equipoise. If evidence is equal on both sides, they're supposed to rule in your favor. Does the VA get it right at the regional level every time? No. But they do get that right at the Board of Appeals because they understand the law better, okay? So how can you set yourself up for success, right? One is, well, if I know that the C&P examiner may give an opinion that's maybe not favorable, how can I combat that? Well, provide other medical opinions, nexus letters, either a nexus for a service connected or a nexus to an existing condition for a secondary, providing that from your doctor, right? Which Clay said 7 different times now in different ways, in different segments. It's that important is the reason why he keeps bringing it up, because in the event that the C&P examiner goes, nah, I don't think so. Well, I have 1 or 2 different letters from different medical providers that state, oh yeah, no, this is true, right? And even better, if your medical provider says more than likely caused from X or due to Y, right? Because now you're offsetting it, bringing it now into equipoise, which means they're supposed to rule in your favor, right? So that's the idea of it. If you could go back, swim upstream, do it over again, you would make sure that you had that evidence in your file instead of coin flipping it at the C&P exam. You want to stack the deck in your favor. You have access to the enemy's playbook, right? In many fashions. So utilize that. Now, let's say that we are at the point of you're denied, you read through it, you know what you're missing, and now it's a matter of don't rush it, okay? I think that rushing to file, whether it's filing your first claim or filing for a supplemental claim for a denial in this situation, is one of those things that we often do, right? You just rush to, oh, I'm going to get them back. And we miss out on taking the time to develop and add more documentation to support our claim. Don't rush. Take your time. You have a year from your denial to preserve that original effective date with your intent to file, or if you didn't file an intent to file, your original filing date. So take your time to, in my opinion, double down on the evidence that's needed. Give them twice as much as you think that you need to prove that point, because, again, treat this process like it's a multi-million-dollar deal, because it is. Don't half-ass it. Take the time, get the information you need, have your doctor write you a letter. If your doctor won't write you a letter, consider going to it. You've already been denied now, which Clay had already talked about. Consider paying for one. That's on you. It's your own decision. Google search it, research it, whatever. And if you decide to go pay for one, pay for one. There's no guarantees of outcome, blah, 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 right? But it's going to help stack the deck in your favor. You've been denied. Double down on the information needed for an approval. And then if they deny you again, you have some sort of comfort in knowing, look, I've provided enough to feel as though I'm at least 50-50. So you could shoot it over to the Board of Veterans Appeals. And in my opinion, I'm always a fan of submitting additional evidence at any point I can through the process. So if you go from a supplemental that gets denied and now you're going to the board, select the option to submit more evidence and submit more evidence again. Go back again to your doctor and have them put in some more information. So that's it for me, Clay, on that. It's really, try to circumvent that up front, learn from other people's mistakes to begin with. But if you find yourself in a denial situation, I think that it's really important to double down on providing additional information to help get them to rule in your favor.
Oh yeah, no. So I completely agree. Last thing I'll add about denials, then we can move on to new conditions and presumptives, which you had talked about all three, but I just want to say it up front. You have three options, right? You have the higher level review. I always recommend that with an informal conference personally. You have the supplemental claim, and then you have the Board of Veteran Appeals, right? The BVA, known as the board. And so a higher level review is just going to review your evidence for that claim. So you're not able to submit more evidence. This is my opinion. Okay. I love stating sentences with "this is my opinion," because it's going to be good, right? So in my opinion, I see more favorable higher level reviews when it comes to increases versus higher level reviews when it comes to service connection, right? Even if a higher level review rolls in a duty to assist error, that's like technically the best possible outcome of the HLR is to service connect, but you're rarely going to see that, right? Obviously, the VA made a very clear mistake if that's the case. You will generally see a duty to assist error, and you'll go through the process again, which is technically a supplemental claim, and then it'll be denied again. So I rarely see HLRs, overturn a service connection decision. I generally see HLRs rule. I'm not going to say generally rule in favor, but the favorable HLRs I do see are for increases, just generally speaking, right? But that's your option. You can't submit evidence, HLR. Then a supplemental claim, which we've been talking about this whole time, is there's two things you have to know about submitting a supplemental. It's new and relevant. Let's break down what that means in VA terms. New meaning they didn't have it before, right? Hey, there's this new piece of evidence. All right, got it. That's one check mark box. You still have to check mark the relevant. What does relevant mean? Relevant in supplemental claim means it combats the reason for denial. So if you already have a current diagnosis and now you're submitting your treatment plan, for instance, right? That would be new evidence, but it's not relevant because you're already diagnosed, because the reason for denial was because you didn't have the in-service event, right? And so that supplemental claim, it'll say, hey, you'll get the decision letter that says you didn't submit new and relevant evidence, therefore we close the supplemental claim. And then you have the Board of Veteran Appeals. Jason, I know you went through the board personally, so if you can speak on that really quick, and then we'll transition to new conditions and presumptive conditions.
Sure. So the board, you get 3 decisions as well, which is funny, right? So you could pick if you want to just have them review, kind of like a higher level review, but at the board level. This would be really if you believe that the VA just wasn't following the law at all, right? Like they missed a piece of the law, because you got to think about it. It's going to a judge. They're very the law specific, right? If you know for sure, I never suggest just letting them review it. I'm always adding extra stuff, because why not? Then the next one is adding additional evidence, which, like Clay said, new and relevant type of information. This can include lay statements specifically regarding the reasons that you have, right? So lay evidence is like statements from you, buddy statements, whatever it is, right? Anything. I am telling you, I would submit anything to just provide an additional light on the situation. And again, just trying to double down on the information. You can also select a hearing. That can be like a virtual type of a hearing, or you can actually go to DC and sit there and have a talk with the judge. You're not going to get a free vacation out of it. You actually have to pay for your travel and arrangements and all that stuff. I have seen good results with the board from both my personal level as well as an accredited veteran service officer. I've seen good results with the board. I've always been happy with the board. I always feel as though they've been fair. The only issue, right, is time. So I wouldn't suggest going straight to the board, although that's an option nowadays. I think that happened through the Mission Act. It used to be not an option up front. You had to deal with the VA first and then go there. But now you can pick that straight out the gate if you want, but it's going to add a lot of time. So ideally, you would do either a higher level review or the supplemental prior to going to the board. That's all I would add to that.